American Wall Street Journal reporter Evan Gershkovich has been a political prisoner of the Russian government for over a year. He was imprisoned on false charges of being a spy, but for all intents and purposes, he is a hostage of Vladimir Putin's regime. Negotiations to free Gershkovich appear to be ongoing, but so far the United States has not been able to secure his release. And now, in a move that is truly appalling, even by his degraded standards, Donald Trump appears to be openly colluding with Vladimir Putin in the hostage-taking of Evan Gershkovich. And the price of his release is electing Donald Trump. It sounds like I'm exaggerating. Just listen to the candidate himself.
Evan Gershkovich, the reporter for the Wall Street Journal who is being held by Russia, will be released almost immediately after the election, but definitely before I assume office. He will be home. He will be safe. Vladimir Putin, president of Russia, will do that for me, and I don't believe he'll do it for anyone else, and we will be paying nothing. Biden likes to pay massive numbers. We will be paying nothing.
Okay, so there are two possibilities here. One is that Trump is lying, that he's no actual means of knowing whether that would happen. And if that's the case, not only is it an unspeakably cruel thing to say to the people that love Evan, Trump is also, let's be clear here, actively hampering the negotiations for Gershkovich's release because he is sending a signal to Russia not to free him until after the election, either under the guise of some better deal from Trump or as a tool to help Trump get elected, which Vladimir Putin absolutely wants to do. We know that. Remember, Trump has issued these kinds of open signals to the Russian government before.
Russia, if you're listening, I hope you're able to find the 30,000 emails that are missing. I think you will probably be rewarded mightily by our press.
Almost immediately after he said that in 2016, Russian actors attempted to hack both Hillary Clinton's personal office and her campaign. That's one possibility. Trump doesn't have a deal with Putin. He's just posturing. The other possibility is that Trump actually does have some back channel to Putin, that he is discussing a deal the two of them have already worked out. He seems to be very specific about the timing after I'm elected, but before I'm sworn in. Now, that appears to be what he's implying at any rate. We have no idea if it's true. To be honest, it does sound a bit far-fetched. But I would note there's absolutely precedent for an American presidential candidate to hold secret back-channel negotiations with a foreign government or adversary to influence the outcome of the election. Back in 1968, Richard Nixon was running against Hubert Humphrey, the sitting vice president under Lyndon Johnson, amidst the backdrop of a catastrophic war in Vietnam. Just a few days before the election, it looked like the Johnson administration was on the cusp of securing a negotiation to end the war. So at the last minute, the Nixon campaign opened up a secret back channel with the South Vietnamese in order to get them to pull out of the peace talks.
On November 2nd, with just 3 days to go until Americans went to the polls, President Thieu suddenly announced that the South Vietnamese government would not attend the proposed talks after all. A representative of the Nixon campaign at the candidate's personal direction had secretly contacted the Saigon government, urging Thieu to stay away from the talks, promising that once Nixon was elected, he would drive a harder bargain with Hanoi than Humphrey would. And
it worked. With the peace talks stalled, Nixon won the election a few days later. He prolonged the war in order to get elected. The delay and Nixon's subsequent illegal expansion of the war cost 20,000 American lives and millions of Vietnamese, Laotian, and Cambodian lives. And a similar kind of thing happened again in 1980, in that election, when the next Democratic president, Jimmy Carter, was facing a foreign policy crisis of his own.
Good evening. The American embassy in Tehran is in the hands of Muslim students tonight. Spurred on by an anti-American speech by the Ayatollah Khomeini, they stormed the embassy, fought the Marine Guards for 3 hours, overpowered them, and took dozens of American hostages.
More than 50 Americans are being held hostage in Iran. It was a political disaster for Carter, and it was later discovered his opponent, Ronald Reagan, set up a secret back channel of his own. Reagan ally, former Texas Governor John Connally, traveled to a number of Middle Eastern countries in the summer of 1980, where he encouraged the leaders he met there to pass along a message to Iran, as the New York Times put it. Don't release the hostages before the election. Reagan will win and give you a better deal. Again, it worked. Reagan won. And in a final twist of the knife to Carter, the hostages were released just minutes after the new president, Ronald Reagan, was sworn in. All of which is to say, if we look at history, it is perfectly plausible that Donald Trump does have some kind of back channel to Russia. But at the end of the day, whether Trump is just making things up and trying to influence Russia from afar, that is to keep Gershkovich hostage, or whether he really does have a secret deal in place to keep him hostage. If Donald Trump really does have any power to get Gershkovich released and isn't making that happen right now, then it is Donald Trump holding that American hostage.